They say love comes when you least expect it. For years, I convinced myself that relationships with women were a phase I'd outgrow, that they were too fragile, too full of unspoken rules and inevitable disappointment.
Oh.
But then she walked into my life, and every certainty I'd clung to began to dissolve. This is the story of how I went from self-imposed exile to finding a love I never thought I'd deserve. I grew up in a quiet suburb where the blueprint for life was etched in stone. Graduate, had a nice girl, buy a house, raise kids who'd repeat the cycle. My father was a high school football coach. My mother chaired the PTA. Deviation wasn't an option. It was whispered about in the teacher's lounge or condemned in the Sunday sermon. So I learned to perform. I dated the homecoming queen, cheered at pep rallies, and buried the part of me that noticed the curve of a girl's smile in a way that made my pulse stutter. I built a life that looked perfect from the outside, but inside it was hollow. When I left for college in the city at 22, I told myself the distance would fix me. New streets, new faces, new rules. Yet the old script followed. I threw myself into pre-med, then residency, then a cardiology fellowship. The hospital became my fortress. 12-hour shifts, overnight calls. The sterile hum of monitors, those were safe, predictable. No one asked why I never brought anyone to the holiday party. No one noticed the way my eyes lingered on the new radiology resident during grand rounds. Her name was Alina. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of gray morning where the fluorescent lights in the atrium felt too bright. The chief of staff clapped her on the shoulder. Everyone, Dr. Elena Vasquez, our new interventional radiology fellow. She'll be rotating with us for the next 6 months. I was hunched over a tablet, reviewing echo results, when she stepped into the conference room. She wore navy scrubs that somehow looked tailored, her dark hair pulled into a low knot that revealed the clean line of her neck. When she smiled, small, professional, but genuine, something in the room tilted. She scanned the table, nodded at the attendings, then her gaze landed on me. Dr. Harlow. She asked, reading my badge. I've read your paper on stress cardiomyopathy. Fascinating. I managed to nod. My tongue felt thick. Thank you. Over the next weeks, Alina moved through the hospital like she'd always belonged. She asked sharp questions in morning report, remembered the names of the night nurses, and had a way of calming frantic families with a single sentence. People gravitated toward her. I did my best to stay on the periphery, volunteering for extra cath lab cases, hiding in dictation cubicles. But Alina had a talent for finding the quiet corners. One afternoon, she appeared beside me in the physician's lounge, holding 2 cups of coffee. Black, 2 sugars, right? She said, sliding one across the table. I stared. I'd mentioned it once, in passing 3 days earlier. How did you muttered it to the barista when you thought no one was listening, she said, settling into the chair opposite me. So, what do you do when you're not saving hearts? The question caught me off guard. I read journals, mostly. Sometimes novels. Old ones. Old ones, she repeated, tilting her head. Like what Dickens, Austen? Brontë, I admitted. Wuthering Heights? The good parts, anyway? She laughed, low and warm. Heathcliff's not exactly a role model. No, I said, surprising myself with a smile, but the passions. Honest. Her eyes lingered on mine a second longer than necessary. Then the pager on her hip chirped, and the moment folded itself away. Still, the cracks kept forming. She'd leave a sticky note on my computer with a radiology joke. She'd save me the last chocolate chip cookie from the nurse's station. Once, during a 12-hour shift, she found me asleep on the couch in the call room and draped her white coat over my shoulders without a word. Each gesture was small, deniable. Together, they eroded the walls I'd spent a decade reinforcing. At night, in the on-call bunk, I replayed every interaction. The way her fingers brushed mine when we passed a chart, the soft cadence of her voice when she said my name, Malix, never Dr. Harlow after the first week. The way she leaned in during consults close enough that I could smell her shampoo, something citrus and clean. I told myself it was nothing. That relationships between women were dramatic, unsustainable, Destined to implode under the weight of family expectations and hospital gossip, Alina didn't fit that narrative. She was steady, brilliant, unflinching, and every day, the story I'd told myself about who I was allowed to love felt thinner. The invitation came on a Friday in early December. It's a city already glittering with holiday lights. We'd just finished a marathon kaisastemi at 2 a.m., a widowmaker that took 4 stents and 2 units of blood. By the time we scrubbed out, dawn was bleeding pink across the skyline. Alina peeled off her gloves, stretched, and said, "A few of us are hitting the lantern after shift change. You should come." My default was refusal. I had charts to finish, a presentation to prep, a perfectly valid excuse. But she was looking at me with that half smile, the one that made my ribs feel too tight. "I'll think about it," I said. She bumped my shoulder with hers. "I'll hold you to that." I spent the day bargaining with myself. I could go home, shower, collapse into bed, safe, familiar, or I could walk into a bar full of colleagues and risk everything I'd spent years protecting. At 7:12 p.m., I found myself in the elevator, still in scrubs. Hair damp from the quickest shower known to medicine. The lantern was tucked beneath a brownstone on the edge of the medical district exposed brick. Edison bulbs, the low thump of jazz. Alina had claimed a corner booth. She'd changed into jeans and a black sweater that made her eyes look darker. When she saw me, she waved me over like it was the most natural thing in the world. I slid in beside her. Our knees touched under the table. Neither of us moved away. The others, 2 surgical residents, pharmacist and ER nurse, were already deep in debate about the best late-night taco truck. I sipped a whiskey I didn't taste and tried to follow the conversation. Alina's presence beside me was a live wire. Every time she laughed, the sound vibrated through my arm where it rested against hers. At one point, she leaned in, her breath warm against my ear. "You're doing that thing again?" "What thing?" "Calculating risk in your head like it's a differential diagnosis." I huffed a laugh. "Occupational hazard." "Well," she said, her voice dropping. "Diagnosis. You're here. Prognosis. Unknown, but promising." The table erupted in a story about a patient who'd proposed to his nurse mid-colonoscopy. I barely heard it. Alina's hand had settled on the seat between us, palm up, an invitation. My pulse hammered so loudly I was sure she could hear it. Slowly, deliberately, I let my fingers brush hers. She curled them, linking us together beneath the table's shadow. Hours slipped by. One by one, people peeled off Furley shifts, hangovers to nurse, spouses waiting at home. Eventually it was just us and the bartender wiping down glasses. Alina paid the tab before I could protest. Outside, the air was sharp with coming snow. We walked toward the subway, shoulders bumping. Glasses. Alina paid the tab before I could protest. Outside, the air was sharp with coming snow. We walked toward the subway, shoulders bumping. "You survived," she said, echoing her words from weeks ago. Barely. She stopped under a street lamp, hands in her coat pockets. "You know, you're not as impenetrable as you think you are." I swallowed. "I'm working on it." Her gaze was steady. "I see you, Alex. The way you check on the janitor who had knee surgery. The way you stay late to hold a patient's hand when their family can't get there in time. You're kind. And you're terrified of letting anyone close enough to see it." The city noise faded to a hush. Snowflakes began to drift between us, catching the light like tiny sparks. I wanted to deny it. Instead, I heard myself say, "I don't know how to do this." "You already are," she said softly. She stepped closer. The space between us shrank 2 inches. I could see the faint scar above her left eyebrow, the way her lashes cast shadows on her cheeks. My heart was a runaway train. Then her hand found mine again, warm despite the cold. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to the corner of my mouth, chaste, questioning. When I didn't pull away, she kissed me fully. Soft, certain, tasting of whiskey and winter air. I kissed her back like a man who'd forgotten. He was starving until the first bite of food. We broke apart only when a cab honked nearby. Foreheads still touching, she whispered, "Come home with me." I should have hesitated. Instead, I nodded. Her apartment was on the 15th floor of a pre-war building with creaky radiators and a view of the river. She flicked on a single lamp, kicked off her boots, and turned to me. "No pressure," she said. "We can just talk." "Or not talk." I laughed, shaky. "I'm not great at either." She crossed the room, took my coat, hung it beside hers. Then she was in my arms again, and talking felt beside the point. We kissed against the hallway wall, slow and exploratory, learning the shape of each other. When we made it to her bedroom, moonlight striped the floor through half-closed blinds. Clothes fell away like old defenses. Her skin was warm, her hands sure. She traced the scar on my shoulder from a childhood bike crash and kissed it like it was something precious. I mapped the freckles across her collarbone with my mouth, memorizing the sounds she made when I touched her just right. Afterward, we lay tangled in sheets that smelled of her detergent and something indefinably Alina. She drew lazy circles on my chest. "Still calculating risk?" she murmured. "Revise my assessment," I said, voice rough. "Benefits outweigh the costs." She laughed into my neck. The months that followed were a slow unwinding. We learned each other in pieces. The way she took her coffee, oat milk, no sugar, the scar on her knee from a childhood soccer injury, the fact that she cried at the end of the notebook every single time. I learned that she kept a jar of sea glass on her windowsill, collected from beaches her grandmother took her to as a kid. She learned that I still slept with the ratty stuffed bear my sister gave me before she moved to Seattle. We kept it quiet at work. Not out of shame, but caution hospital politics were brutal, and we wanted the space to figure us out without an audience. Still, there were moments. Her hand on my lower back as we reviewed films in the dark reading room. The way I'd bring her tea when she pulled overnight call. The secret smile we shared in crowded elevators. One night in March, after a particularly brutal Shift 3 codes, 1 save, 2 losses, we met on the roof of the parking garage. The city sprawled below us, a glittering circuit board. Alina leaned against the railing, wind whipping her hair. "I talked to my mom today," she said. I tensed. Her family was old-school Cuban Catholic. Mine was WASP and repressed. We'd both been dodging that conversation. She asked if I was seeing anyone. Alina turned to me. I told her yes. That it was serious. That it was a woman. My breath caught. "And," she cried. Then she asked if you like Era's Compalo. Elena's smile was small but fierce. "She wants to meet you. Easter." I stared at her, throat tight. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." She took my hand. "I'm tired of half-lives, Alex. I want all of it. With you." The fear was still there, a low hum beneath my ribs. But for the first time, it wasn't louder than the want. Easter Sunday. I stood in her mother's kitchen in Coral Gables, sleeves rolled up, learning how to fold empanada dough under the watchful eye of a woman who'd raised 6 kids and still had the energy to interrogate me about my cholesterol. Elena's father grilled me about my golf handicap non-existent, while her little brother tried to set me up with his lesbian roommate from college. By the time we sat down to dinner, I was sweaty, flour-dusted, and happier than I'd ever been at any family table. Back in the city, we carved out rituals. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, where she'd buy too many peaches and I'd carry the bags. Thursday nights on our couch with takeout and whatever medical drama we could mock in real time. The first time I said I love you, it was 3 a.m. in the cath lab. It's post-arrest, adrenaline still singing in my veins. She was suturing a groin puncture, and I just blurted it. She looked up, eyes shining behind her mask, and said, "Took you long enough, Harlow." We fought, of course, about call schedules and whose turn it was to do dishes and the time I forgot her birthday because I was elbow deep in a pericardial effusion. But we learned the shape of each other's apologies, hers with homemade flan, mine with terrible attempts at salsa dancing in the living room. 2 years later, on the anniversary of that first drink at the Lantern, I took her to the roof of the hospital where we'd had our parking garage talk. I'd bribed the security guard with baseball tickets. The city lights were brighter than ever. I got down on one knee with a ring I'd designed with her grandmother's sea glass set in white gold. "Alina Sofia Vasquez," said, voice cracking, "you rewrote every rule I thought I had to follow. Marry me. Let's keep breaking them together," she cried. Then she tackled me so hard, we both almost went over the ledge. We married in her parents' backyard the following spring. Under a canopy of bougainvillea, I wore a linen suit. She wore her mother's lace veil. My sister flew in from Seattle and gave a toast that made everyone cry. Elena's father walked her down the aisle to a cello cover of La Vie en Rose. We danced until the mosquitoes drove us inside, then kept dancing in the kitchen while her aunts argued over who made the better moja to us. Sometimes, late at night, I still catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop. For the mess, the complication, the heartbreak I was so sure would come. But then Alina rolls over, hooks her leg over mine, and murmurs something ridiculous in her sleep, and I remember, love isn't the absence of fear. It's the choice to stay anyway. This is the story of how I stopped building walls and started building a life. With her, we stopped at the mouth of the subway, the platform's iron ribs glowing under sodium lights. A southbound 6 train screamed in, the rails singing like struck wire. The vibration climbed my calves and settled behind my ribs. "I like this," Alex said. "Just being around you. No flourish, no plea. A fact laid on the concrete between us." I opened my mouth, closed it. The old reflex cracked a joke, changed the subject rose and died. The silence stretched thin and bright. "Same," I finally said, the words small enough to slip through the grill. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. For one suspended second, I thought he might close the distance, but he only dipped his head. "Monday, then." He descended the stairs. I watched the back of his neck disappear into the crowd, the city's pulse suddenly too loud. That night I lay rigid, replaying the moment until the ceiling blurred. Wanting more felt like stepping onto a frozen lake, hearing the first crack. I sat up, palms to my eyes. Wanting meant risk. Risk meant the old bruises, rejection, exposure, the particular ache of being left behind. Yet every time I tried to smother the thought, Alex's half-smile slid back in. Stubborn as light under a door, the next week the office rearranged itself around us. He took the chair beside mine at lunch, instead of opposite. In stand-ups, he murmured asides that landed only in my ear. After hours, we lingered over spreadsheets, trading fragments. The city he'd left at 19, the mother I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. The version of ourselves we were still editing. His questions were gentle, but precise, slipping past the tripwires I'd laid years ago. One Thursday, the floor emptied early. We packed laptops in the half-dark. "You're a locked room," he said, zipping his bag. "I keep finding new keys." I laughed to cover the jolt. "Maybe the lock's rusted shut. I've got time," he said, and left before I could answer. I stood among the silent desks, the hum of sleeping monitors louder than my heartbeat. That weekend, I didn't open the briefing deck. Instead, I scrolled our chat memes, a voice note of him humming off-key, a reminder to eat something green. Saturday night, I caved. Me? Still awake? Alex, failing to sleep. Bad sci-fi? Me sink at the asteroid scene? Alex, deal. Prepare to suffer. 2 hours later, we were breathless over exploding spaceships and dialogue that clanged like pots. When the credits rolled, he sent a single emoji. My apartment felt larger, as if laughter had pushed the walls back. Monday, I found myself scanning the bullpen for the slope of his shoulders. When he leaned over my monitor, the faint cedar in his hair short-circuited my pulse. The scaffolding I'd built around myself was loosening plank by plank. Walking out together, he slowed. "You stayed for drinks last week. Thought you'd bolt." "Accurate," I said. "But you didn't." His voice dropped. "That counts." At the crosswalk, the light turned. "Counts for what?" "That you're braver than you give yourself credit for." He stepped off the curb, leaving the words vibrating in the air behind him. That night, I admitted it aloud to the dark. I wanted him in a way that rearranged my organs. The admission felt like stepping off a ledge. The following weeks were a slow tilt. Friendship had become something with gravity. Then, one gray Thursday, he perched on the corner of my desk. Dinner? Not work dinner? Actual dinner. Every reflex screamed retreat, but his eyes held a quiet dare. "Okay," I said. The word tasted like metal and honey. The place was narrow. Brick walls sweating candlelight, a scratched Coltrane record spinning. We talked about everything except the office. He told me about the small town that had never quite fit him, the night he came out to his father, and the silence that followed. The string of almost relationships that taught him what he would no longer accept. No self-pity, just inventory. I listened, envying the clean lines of his certainty. I gave him pieces in return. The father who left. The mother who stayed but looked through me. The conviction that love was a language I'd never been fluent in. He didn't offer platitudes. His thumb brushed my knuckles once, a Morse code of presence. Outside, the city had turned liquid neon. Our steps matched without trying. At my door, the air thickened. "Question," he said, voice low. "Do you ever think about us?" The word us hung between us like a match head. I could have laughed it off. Instead, every day. His smile unfolded slowly. Then he kissed me soft, deliberate, asking and answering at once. The street lamp above us flickered, or maybe that was my vision. When we parted, foreheads touching, he whispered finally. I laughed, shaky. Yeah, finally. At night I replayed it until the reel burned. Then the old panic surged. What if the ice breaks? By morning, I'd armored up terse replies, eyes on my screen, the coward's playbook. He gave me 3 days. On the 4th, he was at my apartment, coat dusted with rain. Not angry. Just there I figured you'd ghost, he said. But I'm not going anywhere until you tell me why. The hallway light buzzed. I stepped aside. He entered, dripping on the mat. I told him everything, the father-shaped hole. The fear that closeness was a prelude to abandonment, the reflex to cauterize before I could bleed. He listened without moving. When I finished, the silence was enormous. I'm not your father, he said, and you're not the kid waiting for the door to slam. But I get it. Fear's a hell of a bouncer. Took one step closer. Let me in anyway. We'll take it slow, one room at a time. I studied his face, steady, unafraid. Something inside me unclenched. Start with the kitchen? I asked. He smiled, the same half smile from the subway. I make a mean grilled cheese. We didn't solve everything that night, but he stayed until the rain stopped, and when he left he kissed me again, softer, like a promise kept in installments. The next morning I woke to a text. Alex, coffee run. Your order's already in line. I stared at the screen, heart thudding with a new rhythm terror. Yes, but laced with something brighter. I typed back, me, extra foam. See you in 10. Outside, the city was the same chaotic orchestra. Inside me, a door I'd bolted years ago stood ajar, light slipping through the crack. The rain was a soft percussion on the cafe awning when I first saw Ethan. I had ducked inside to escape the downpour, shaking droplets from my coat, and there he was leaning against the counter. Sleeves rolled to the elbow, sketching on a napkin while the barista steamed milk behind him. The place smelled of cardamom and wet wool. I ordered a black coffee I didn't want, just to stay near the warmth of the room and the quiet focus on his face. When he looked up, his eyes were the color of storm-lit water. Mind if I borrow your pen? He asked, nodding at the one tucked behind my ear. I handed it over without thinking. Our fingers brushed. Static. That was the beginning. Well, I didn't know it yet. I was Liam Carter, 31. Senior copywriter at an ad agency that specialized in luxury watches and moral compromise. My apartment overlooked the river, all glass and sharp angles, the kind of place that looked curated but felt hollow. I kept the blinds half drawn so the city lights wouldn't remind me how alone I was. My parents lived an hour north in the same brick colonial where I'd grown up, where Sunday dinners still ended with my father asking when I'd settle down with a nice girl. I'd stopped correcting him years ago. Ethan Hale was a photographer who shot editorial spreads for magazines. I pretended not to read. He lived in a converted warehouse loft in the Arts District. Walls lined with prints in black and white and the occasional burst of impossible color. He wore his hair a little too long, carried a Leica that had seen 3 continents, and laughed like he'd never been told to keep it down. We met properly the next week when I returned to the cafe for the pen I'd forgotten. He slid it across the table with a grin. "Interest," he said. "You owe me coffee." I paid. We talked. He asked what I did. I asked what he shot. He said, "People who don't know they're beautiful yet." I laughed too loud. By the 3rd coffee, he knew I wrote taglines for watches that cost more than rent. I knew he'd once spent a month in Marrakesh chasing light through Riyadh doorways. By the 5th, we were meeting after work, walking the river path while the sky bruised into evening. He never asked why I flinched when couples passed us holding hands. I never asked why he carried a camera like a shield. One night, the air smelled of ozone and fried dough from a food truck. We sat on the pier, legs dangling above black water. Ethan pulled a small tin from his pocket, offered me a clove cigarette. I took it. The first drag burned. The second tasted like rebellion. "You're careful," he said, exhaling smoke toward the stars. "Like you're waiting for the floor to drop." Stared at the glowing tip. "Maybe it always does." He turned, studied me. "Not with me." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. The first time he kissed me, we were in the back of a cab, rain streaking the windows like static. His mouth tasted of gin and lime. My pulse hammered so hard I thought the driver could hear it. When we broke apart, Ethan's thumb brushed my lower lip. "Still breathing?" he asked. "Barely." He smiled, soft, "Good." After that, we were careful in public shoulders, brushing coded glances. In private, we were reckless. His loft became a country with its own laws. No clocks, no last names, no talk of tomorrow. We mapped each other with mouths and fingertips, learned the topography of want. He photographed me asleep, light striping my back through half-open blinds. I wrote captions for his shots in the margins of takeout menus. But the outside world leaked in, my mother called. "Bring someone to your cousin's engagement party. Everyone's asking." Said I was busy. At work, a client asked if I had a girlfriend yet. I laughed it off. The laugh felt like glass in my throat. Ethan noticed the distance growing between us like frost on a window. One night, after I'd canceled plans for the 3rd time, he set his camera down with deliberate care. "Talk to me, Liam." I paced the loft barefoot on cold concrete. "I can't do this halfway." "I can't be your secret." "You're not. I am. I'm the guy you text after 9, the one you don't tag in photos. I'm the footnote." He crossed the room, took my face in his hands. "Then let's write you into the story." I wanted to. But the story I'd been told my whole life had different characters, a different ending. So I ran. I stopped answering texts. Deleted his number, then undeleted it. Slept with the phone under my pillow like a loaded gun. Work became a refuge endless revisions. Client dinners, the hum of fluorescent lights. My boss praised my focus. I smiled until my face hurt. Ethan didn't chase. He sent one message. Asterisk, "I'm here when you're ready to stop hiding." Asterisk then. Silence. The silence was worse than shouting. 3 weeks later, I stood outside his building at 2 a.m., soaked from a cab ride I didn't remember taking. I buzzed. No answer. Buzzed again. The door clicked. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time. He opened the door in sweatpants, hair wild, eyes wary. "Liam, I'm an idiot," I said. He leaned against the frame. "Took you long enough to notice." Inside, the loft smelled of developer chemicals and coffee. His latest prints hung drying on a Line City rooftops at dawn, a child's balloon escaping into sky. I stopped in front of one, my own silhouette against his window. Head bowed. "You kept it," I whispered. "I keep everything that matters." I turned. "I'm scared, I know. I don't know how to do this." "Then let me show you." He didn't kiss me. Not yet. Instead, he made tikka mammal, 2 sugars, the way I secretly liked it. We sat on the floor, backs against the couch, knees touching. I told him about my father's sermons on Sundays, my mother's hope chest full of wedding magazines, the way I'd practiced saying I'm gay in the mirror and always choked on the word. When I finished, my voice raw, Ethan set his mug down. Your fear is real, but it's not the whole story, what is? He took my hand, pressed it over his heart. I felt the steady thump beneath bone and muscle. Mine answered, erratic. I can't promise it'll be easy, he said, but I can promise I won't leave first. I cried then, ugly and loud. He held me until the storm passed. The next morning I called my parents, asked them to meet me at the house. Ethan waited in the car, engine idling. My mother opened the door in her gardening apron, soil under her nails. My father stood behind her, arms crossed. The living room smelled of lemon polish and old books. I sat on the same floral couch where I'd opened college acceptance letters. My knees bounced. I'm in love, I said. With a man. His name is Ethan. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's jaw tightened. I've been lying for years, I continued. Not to hurt you, to protect you from disappointment, but I can't anymore. I won't. Silence stretched, thick as humidity. Then my father spoke, voice rough. You think we'd love you less? I didn't know. He looked at my mother. She nodded, tears tracking through her powder. We'll learn, he said. We'll try. It wasn't absolution. It was a beginning. Ethan's gallery opening was in a converted textile mill, exposed brick and Edison bulbs. His series, Hidden Cities, hung in stark frames, doorways half open, faces turned away, lights spilling like secrets. I wore the navy blazer he'd picked out, sleeves a touch too short. My palms sweated. He spotted me across the room. For a moment, he looked like he might bolt. Then he smiled, small and real. I crossed the floor. The crowd parted without meaning to. Hi, I said. Hi. I brought something. I pulled a folded sheet from my pocket, my resignation letter, effective immediately. I'm done writing lies for watches. I want to write truth, starting with us. His eyes widened. I love you, I said, loud enough for the room to hear. I love your terrible taste in music and the way you hum when you edit photos. I love that you see me even when I don't want to be seen. I was wrong about everything, about love, about safety, about what I deserve. You're not a risk. You're the surest thing I've ever known. Someone gasped. A camera flashed. Ethan didn't flinch. He stepped forward, cupped my face. You beautiful, impossible man. Then he kissed me. Not careful. Not coded. Acclaiming. The room erupted. Applause. Whistles. Someone shouting, "Get a room." We laughed against each other's mouths. Later, walking home through empty streets, he laced our fingers. Still scared? He asked, terrified, I admitted. Good. Means it matters. We stopped under a street lamp. He pulled out his camera, snapped a photo of whose shadows long. Faces lit gold. For the story, he said. Months later, my new business cards read Liam Carter, narrative consultant. I helped brands tell honest stories. Ethan's photos hung in my office. We cooked pasta on Tuesdays, argued over whose turn it was to buy coffee beans, fell asleep to the sound of rain on skylights. Some nights, the old fear whispered. I'd wake reaching for him. He'd pull me close, murmur, still here. One evening. At another opening this time, mine. A pop-up of micro stories projected on warehouse walls. Ethan stood beside me in a charcoal suit, hair tamed for once. A woman asked how we met. I started to answer, but Ethan beat me to it. He stole my pen, he said. Then he gave me his heart. Interest compounds. I laughed so hard I had to lean on him. Later, under string lights, he kissed my temple. Still think love's a bad investment? I looked at him at us. Reflected in 100 strangers, Izan knew the answer. I was wrong, I said. About everything, except you.